This is Jeremy. Welcome to Eighthworld. Good evening, everybody. This is Jeremy. Welcome to Eighthworld. It is close to 7 p.m. Central Time on June 20th, 2020. Today is the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, and tomorrow is Father's Day. So I'm not actually going to be recording tomorrow because I'll be otherwise occupied. Last week, my top 10 list of formative works that I read in high school I think went pretty well. I'd like to do another list this week. This list is going to be 7 recently published fantasy novels that I've read and enjoyed and recommend. A lot of it begins as market research, honestly. I am an aspiring fantasy writer myself, and these are among what I've been reading recently to get a better mental picture of the shape the fantasy writing market has taken in recent years. So all of these books are from within the past year or two, maybe with 1 or 2 exceptions, but they're all very recent, and they are in no particular order. The first book on the list is Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames. This is one of those books that I've read that I really wish I'd written myself. It is a wonderful book that shows all sorts of different influences from other fantasy work and video games. There are little Easter eggs throughout them that if you know the stories that they reference, you'll get a kick out of it. And the nature of the story itself really hits home for me because I'm a sucker for any kind of let's get the band back together stories. Kings of the Wild is the story of a group of retired adventurers who come out of retirement to rescue the daughter of their group leader. And it's a pretty fast-paced, action-packed, emotional roller coaster ride that I don't think you would be disappointed with in the least if you were to take it up yourself. Its sequel, Bloody Rose, is just as good, if not in some ways better, and I also recommend it. Now, perhaps I should backtrack a little bit and say that I will attempt to be as sparse on spoilers as I possibly can, but some things may end up creeping out. Now, number 2 on the list is The Grey Bastards. It is a really fun story written by Jonathan French. I believe, if my reading was correct, it actually started out as a self-published novel and won a publishing contract through a contest. It's a really fun story. It makes me nostalgic for the kind of fantasy that I read as a teenager and the D&D group that I had in graduate school. Imagine, if you will, a motorcycle gang spaghetti western type mixed story where all the main characters are half-orcs who ride war pigs into battle. I gotta say, it sounds convoluted and bizarre, but it is fun as hell. I would really recommend The Grey Bastards to anybody who enjoys sword and sorcery fantasy. Number 3 on the list is Sinlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft. It's the first of a trilogy of books focusing on the titular character of Thomas Sinlin. He is a school teacher from a small town in this fantasy world that's based kind of on Babylon, which is a unique idea. I enjoyed that much of it as well. Sinlin is a scholar and nothing else, pretty much. He's kind of clueless about everyday life. He goes on his honeymoon with his new wife to the Tower of Babel, which, from all of his studies, is this great, progressive, technologically advanced bastion of human civilization, but when he gets there he sees that it is this horrible, convoluted, disorganized stack of different worlds, basically, all of which have their own rules that have to be navigated, and some of them are utterly bizarre. And I have to say that it is not the kind of fantasy that I normally read, but it really appealed to me. And watching Sinlin go from a kind of milquetoast scholar to becoming a man of action by the end of this book is really enjoyable. And the questions left unanswered by the end of the first book makes me hungry for the others, to be honest. Number 4 on the list is a very recent release, and it tends to be considered more science fiction than fantasy by a lot of people, but I feel that it is more accurately space fantasy, and that is Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. Besides the uses of magic, particularly necromancy in various forms, and the importance of swordsmanship in this society that Tamsin Muir builds. I have to say, based on those things, that it is very much a fantasy story rather than science fiction, although of course it has the same kinds of sci-fi elements that you would see in Star Wars, which is also a space fantasy. You have spaceships, you have all kinds of crazy technology, you have humanity spread across a number of worlds, you have interstellar travel, etc. Gideon the Ninth was a book that, I'm going to be honest with you, surprised me. I didn't know quite what to expect going into it. I know that it was highly regarded. It was beautifully praised by all sorts of people, all sorts of critics, all sorts of readers, and I decided to give it a shot. I didn't know what to expect, but I was pleased by it. It has a wonderful sense of humor at play in it, and even beyond that, the action is spot on and crisp, and you can see it, and it is gritty. And, it, like somebody else has said, it tears your heart out by the end, because there's the formation of an interesting love story in it as well that I don't want to spoil for you, but I really don't know how to describe it very well because of how unique it is among stories that I've read. I would recommend anybody to take it up themselves. Gideon the Ninth. If you read nothing else on this list, give that one a shot. Number 5 is one that I just recently read, 16 Ways to Defend a Walled City by K.J. Parker, which is the pen name of a British lawyer named Tom Holt, I found out. This is another one that I also wish I had written in some ways, just because of the mad logistics knowledge displayed here. The idea is you have this society that's a lot like the Roman Empire, that is being assaulted from the outside by people that are effectively a lot like the Germanic tribes that also brought Rome low, but you have a character who is a descendant of these same Germanic tribes, who's an outsider in his culture because of it, who is also a colonel in this country's engineering corps, and because of that he is a high-ranking military man, and he has all kinds of crazy knowledge of how to build things. So these tribes come in, they besiege the capital city. He and his troops manage to sneak into the city, and he begins this campaign of bolstering the city's defenses, making sure that they have enough money, making sure that they have enough supplies, making sure that everybody who's left has a job to do. Just the level of detail, even if it's not all entirely accurate, is an amazing read. I loved this book. Just watching the technological advancements that occur as the story goes on, just all of the adaptation that has to go on to fight from the position that the city is in, it's wonderful. If you have any kind of interest in that sort of thing when it comes to the logistical side of fantasy, I would recommend this book highly. Number 6 on the list is The Traitor Baru Cormorant by Seth Dickinson. This is a book that, I'll admit, took me a little bit of time to get into, but I utterly loved. It is a complex world, and a lot of the names are complicated and sometimes confusing, and I guess you could say that about Gideon the Ninth as well, but you get used to everything and you go with it, like any book that you're willing to suspend your disbelief for. Now, The Traitor Baru Cormorant is about a girl named Baru Cormorant who is a bit of a genius who is born into an island tribe of people who practice a group marriage, who are very lax in certain social aspects of their lives that the big bad empire of the world takes issue with. Now, this empire is an interesting conglomeration of ideas that you might see in history when it comes to the Roman Empire, to legalist China, to High Middle Ages Christianity and some of their attitudes. They have this concept involving moral hygiene that basically most sexual activities violate in some way. So, of course, Baru's family is seen as aberrant, and one of her fathers, she has one mother and two fathers in this group family, one of her fathers is murdered because of the way that they live, and using her understanding of this empire's inner workings, their literature, their history, their philosophy that she studies in school. She puts together a very long game to take down this empire from the inside. And I don't want to spoil very much here. This is one of those kinds of works where, I know a lot of people like to pat themselves on the back and say, oh, I saw that coming. Whenever anything happens in a story, they always saw it coming. That was predictable. I'm not like that. I try not to be like that. This, I'm going to say, surprised me at points. There were things that happened in the story that I did not see coming at all, that I was pleased with, that I was pleased to be surprised by. And I'm not going to spoil anything, but the lengths to which Beru Cormorant goes to seek out revenge against this empire that destroyed her family, it's chilling. I'm going to say that. Just this long game that she plays. And again, this is also the first book of a trilogy that I am eager to read. I'll also make a side note here. For any Game of Thrones fans out there, more so than any other item on this list, this would probably be the one that you enjoyed the most, just because of the level of subterfuge and the courtly politics, in a way, that's at play here. That's more strongly put on here than in any other book on this list. Now, my number 7 on this list is King of Ashes by Raymond E. Feist, which is, I'm sure, a familiar name to a lot of fantasy readers. He wrote the Krondor books, has written them for decades. This book is not in the Krondor series. It's the beginning of a new series that he is writing, and I have to say that it's superb, and it's proof that the sword and sorcery subgenre of fantasy is not dead, because here Feist is crafting a beautiful, detailed world, a prophecy of a savior, king, a chosen one, and all sorts of interesting characters who all eventually cross paths. All the great things that you love in a good fantasy story are at play here, and the characters are so well done. I cannot recommend this one enough, which, just like the others on this list, I don't think that it would be on this list if I couldn't highly recommend it. Now, with all of that said, I also have a sizable to-be-read pile, as I'm sure all of you do as well. I think that it is the great curse of loving books and enjoying reading that we will never ever get through everything that we want to read. So of course, even with these books that I've read over the past couple of years, I have a huge number of fantasy books on my to-be-read pile that I might not get through, but there are some that I hope to in the near future. Probably at the top of that list is Child of a Mad God by R.A. Salvatore. If you've listened to previous episodes of this podcast, you know that Salvatore is one of those authors that I read a lot when I was young and whom I feel helped shape me as a reader and as an aspiring writer. Child of a Mad God returns to the world of Corona that he created a couple of decades ago with the Demon Wars books. Those were perhaps his first really big foray outside of the Drizzt books that he was famous for, and I'm eager to read more books set in that world. I remember reading that he always had great plans for this setting and wanted to franchise it out to other writers as well, but I know that that's never really taken place. But maybe now with renewed interest with these new books in that setting, that might finally happen. And also, on a side note, on the subject of R.A. Salvatore, with some of his other work that he's done over the past decade or two, does anybody else really wish that they would come up with another Amalur video game? Salvatore was head writer on Kingdoms of Amalur, which came out last generation. I remember playing it on my Xbox 360, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. It came out around the same time as Skyrim, so it was overshadowed by that, I think, and market trends, but it was still an excellent game and worth playing. If you've never played it, I would recommend looking it up. In fact, if you want something that is a lot like Skyrim, but in some ways might actually be better, check out Kingdoms of Amalur. Now, with all of that said, these are simply my choices for what I wanted to read as market research. I've enjoyed all of these so far. There have been several books, I'll also admit, that I've started but not finished because they just didn't quite hit the spot for me. Anyway, this is my list of recent fantasy novels that I really enjoyed. Thank you for listening. Eighthworld Podcast is and always shall be partnered with Misplaced Muse Creative, a wonderful source of bookish gifts, wax goods, and hot beverages. Please check out the episode description for links to their social media. Be sure to give them a follow across all platforms, and check out the store and make a purchase. Be sure to also like this video, subscribe to the channel, come back for more, and follow me on social media as well. There's all kinds of content coming around all the time, and if you follow me on Instagram, you'll have the best opportunity to keep up with my updates about the fantasy novel that I'm currently writing. I hope that something really comes of it. It is something that I've wanted to do all my life, and I think it might be worth having an episode about that as well, talking about my own desire, my own need to be a writer. Anybody else feel like that? Let me know in the comments below. Let me know what you think of my list. What would be on your list? What do you disagree with me about? What do you agree with me about? Let me know. Anyway, take care of yourselves, stay safe. I will see you all here again in 2 weeks. Thank you.